If you have never tracked your menstrual cycle, now is the time to start. I read a book called Wild Power a few years ago, and I don't use this term lightly, but it was life changing. What it taught me is my own unique energy rhythms. And then I was able to accept those days when I didn't feel so good and also make use of the days when I felt pretty fantastic. So I hope that if you start tracking your menstrual cycle, you'll also be able to get the benefit of knowing yourself better so that you can treat yourself better. So, what we're aiming to get towards is starting to put your unique rhythm on paper and then starting to see if there's a pattern, because there are a lot of obviously things that affect our energy levels and the way that we feel. So, our menstrual cycle is one, but of course, sleep, stress, what we've been eating, our hydration, and how fit we are and how strong we are is also going to impact our energy levels. But if you can find a pattern in your menstrual cycle, then you'll know whether it's all those other things or whether it's this thing. So it's about collecting some data about yourself so that you get to know yourself better and so that you can treat yourself better, and also so that you can maximize those other areas of your life if you need to. You can maximize, looking after your mind. You can maximize your sleep or your hydration or your food or your exercise if you're feeling flat on a day when you wouldn't normally, and things like that. And also, as we age, obviously after 35 and into 40, we're going to start getting some perimenopause symptoms, some pre-menopause symptoms. And the more data we have about ourselves leading up to that time, the more we can share with our medical professionals if we need to go down that track, and the more we've got sort of this understanding of ourselves and what's normal and what's not. So let me go back to that first one. So basically, when you're filling out the chart, you're only going to be able to fit 1 or 2 words a day. In fact, I'll show you an example of mine. So this is an example of basically my menstrual cycle. So you can see that I'm not writing something every day. I'm just sort of highlighting what I'm noticing day to day that seems kind of important. So if I go back to the tips, basically the things that you're kind of looking for are your moods, your energy level, and any other physical symptoms. I've actually just worked out recently that I get itchy on the same day every month, which I think is odd, and I will look into that. But it's interesting that it's on the same day. Like normally you would just go, oh, it's weird, I'm itchy. Maybe it's the seasons. But actually it's my inner seasons. It's my cycle. So really interesting. So day 1 on your chart is going to be the first day that you start bleeding. So if you spot before your period, that's not day 1. Day 1 is the first day you start bleeding. So you can write down how heavy your flow is. Those are good things to track on those first few days. And then you can track your moods, your energy levels, your libido, if you're interested in that, and any other physical symptoms, headaches, cramps, those sorts of things. I found that I probably have about a day of cramping when I've got my actual period, but I also get some cramping when I'm ovulating, which I found really interesting. I never would have picked up on that had I not been tracking and seeing, oh, yep, it's pretty much on the same day and right in the middle of my month. Now, obviously, you can't fit much on your chart. So if you want to journal alongside this, if you want to go really deep with it, then I'd suggest just having a journal separate that you can kind of jot down some extra thoughts if that feels appropriate to you. I've personally never done that, but some people want to dive deeper, so there's your option. And then at the end, like I've done at the end of the month, any days that are not part of your cycle, just cross them off. What I've been finding is that I've been going from 28, 29 days down to 26, 27 days. So that's interesting. I've been noticing that my cycles have been getting shorter. So what I learned in Wild Power is about our inner seasons, that we naturally have this kind of summer, autumn, winter, spring cycle, and that relates to our energy levels. Obviously, in the book, they go into deeper elements and a wider variety of how that kind of impacts your day-to-day life. Obviously, my interest for you is to focus on your fitness and your movement sessions. So what I focus on here is energy levels. So in your winter, when you do have your period, you're going to have lower energy levels probably. And if that's the case, then if you've got the option, then reducing the intensity of your exercise is really smart. You probably don't feel like exercising intensely anyway. So, you don't need to go against that feeling. You can still move, but maybe move gently. In fact, it has been shown that when we do move through our premenstrual and through our period, we do generally feel better, but keeping it gentle is really nice. Going for walks, some yoga, that kind of thing. Obviously, if you've got an event or you're a sports person and you've got your period on that day of the event, you just have to suck it up, right? I was an athlete for decades. I know what that's like. But if we do have the luxury of just decreasing our intensity for those sessions, then, take the option if you want to. So obviously after we come out of winter, we're into spring, and that's obviously when our energy is getting higher, so that's a good time to start upping your sessions if you want to. It's also a really good time to start thinking about the fact that very soon you're going to have the peak of your energy. So what do you want to use that energy for, and that goes with like your broad life or work or whatever it is, like starting to just tune in and go, okay, yeah, my energy levels are going to rise. I'm going to want to say yes to everything. But to look after myself, maybe it's best I say no to a couple of things. And also being aware that as that energy level rises, we want to be more social, we want to be more energetic. And so then we're more likely to say yes to things. But just keep in the back of your mind that you are going to come back to winter soon and you're going to have lower energy levels and you're not going to want to spend so much time with other people. So, just having an understanding of what you want to say yes to, and knowing yourself about how you're going to feel if you're in your winter phase and you've set yourself up for some big event. Anyway, just something to keep in the back of your mind. So obviously through that summer section when we're ovulating, when we do feel fantastic, that's a really good time if you want to push your movement sessions, go for personal bests if you've got some sort of like physical goal, run a bit further, run a bit faster, lift some heavier weights, that kind of thing. That's a great time to push the body. It will cope with it really well. It will recover really well during that time. And then obviously after we come from summer, we're going down into autumn, which we're starting to lead down into our period. And Alexandra and Shani, who wrote Wild Power, will argue that the premenstrual phase of our cycle is the most misunderstood. They argue that that's a great time to sort of tune into ourselves, figure out what's important to us, what's been annoying us, because we get a little bit mad and angry during that time. But it's actually a really nice time to go, well, I am getting mad and angry about this. And then I'm going to go into my period, but I'm going to come out with some energy. So how can I address this issue that's making me mad and angry now? So I know that's off the side of fitness, but I want to highlight that because I think we do go, oh, I'm PMS, it's so horrible, blah, blah, blah. But actually, if we can kind of like look for the positive in it, this is a time where we do get to say, this is hard, how do I fix it? And just sort of mull it over while we've got our period. And then when we come out, when we've got a bit more energy, maybe we can address that issue that's bugging us. So I hope that gives you a little insight into what I learned. Obviously, it's very surface level at this stage. The most important thing is that you dive in, that you start tracking your own cycle, find out about you. What days do you feel fantastic? What days do you feel average? And how can you support yourself through those different phases? So I'll just go back to the one that I've done. So this is very much based on what I literally have this chart on my wall. I've got two actually, because I'm up to the second one now. And I don't track every month now, because I tracked for a good 6 to 8 months to beginning and I could start to see a pattern. And then things started changing for me probably about 6 months ago. So I've started tracking again because I really want to have that data for if I'm getting some perimenopause symptoms and what I can do about that and whether I can dig into those symptoms and find ways of helping myself. But yeah, generally I just, as you can see here, I write down like the days that I feel good. I write down the days that I feel bad. I have some days where I'm like really high and low. And so sometimes I'll draw like a smiley face with a mouth that's like wobbly, because it just sort of shows me that on that day I'm just like all over the place. I don't know what's going on. You probably will find you have a couple of days like that each month because it's kind of the transition between the seasons. There tends to be a day that kind of just throws us a bit. So you might find that you also have that. Like I said, I figured out that I've got like this weird itchy day. And then obviously I've got days where my boobs feel more tender. I've got days where I feel more anxious, and they tend to be around the same time, leading into that premenstrual time that week. Sometimes I get a bit of a tight back and some cramping, which is usually around my ovulation. So that's really interesting. You will have your own unique symptoms. And I hope that by tracking it for a few months, you'll start to see a pattern, and then you'll realize that, just checking in with that. When you have a bad day and maybe you check in with yourself and you're like, oh, why am I having a bad day? Is it because I'm really stressed at work? Is it because I haven't drunk enough water? Is it because I'm drinking too much coffee? Both my problems. Is it because I haven't been eating enough fruit and veggies lately? But if you know that you've got a pattern with your menstrual cycle, then you can kind of say, no, it's not that, it's just this. And then if it doesn't fit with your pattern, then you can say, hey, I do need to address these other areas in my life. I do need to address my stress levels. I do need to do a little bit more fitness so that I feel better in my body, whatever it is. Final note, I did go to boarding school with a bunch of girls, so I am not afraid to talk about these things. So if you do have some questions and you want to chat about it with me, I also am menopause trained. I did my menopause coaching specialist certificate last year, so I do have like this really good overview of what menopause can bring us, but also it does come down to those 5 fundamental health. Are you moving? Are you hydrating? Are you eating nutritious food? So that's protein, veggies, and fruit. Are you sleeping enough? You might need more sleep, especially if you're waking up in the middle of the night with some hot flushes and things like that, which I find. I'm sort of awake for like an hour at night, so I need to go to bed an hour earlier to kind of make up for that hour that I'm just like lying awake for whatever reason, hormones. And then the last one is totally slipped my mind. Is it your stress, maybe? Mindset? Probably. Those are your 5 anyway. So if you're looking after those 5 key areas, those are the foundations for everything. And then looking into other supplements and things like that, just be careful not to be sold a quick fix off the internet. If you don't have your 5 fundamental foundational health behaviors kind of pretty good, they don't have to be perfect, those quick fixes are not going to do much anyway, or they might enhance what you're already doing. So definitely something to think about. But please do not be afraid to get in touch with me. I'm not afraid to talk about this stuff, even though sometimes it can be awkward and taboo with some people. Not with me. Totally cool. All right. Good luck. I hope you enjoy getting to know yourself better.